Ukraine has taken out a brand new Yastreb AV counter-battery radar system, according to Kyiv, just hours after Moscow said it had deployed one of the artillery-seeking systems in the war-torn country. Meanwhile, warriors of a unit of the Ukrainian Special Operation Forces discovered and destroyed the Russian Buk M2 anti-aircraft missile system in the Donetsk direction. According to the information of the official channel of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, operators of the 3rd Separate Special Purpose Regiment, during reconnaissance operations in the Donetsk direction, recorded the Buk M2 anti-aircraft missile system and the 9S-36 detection and targeting station, which is part of the system. During reconnaissance operations in the Donetsk direction, operators of the 3rd Separate Special Purpose Regiment of Ukraine's SOF discovered the occupier's equipment, the Buk M2 anti-aircraft missile system and the 9S-36 detection and targeting station. As emphasized by the command of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Buk air defense system defeats aviation, tactical ballistic and aviation missiles, and surface and ground targets. On Tuesday, Russia's defense ministry said Moscow's troops were using the new Russian Yastreb AV counter-battery radar in Ukraine, designed to detect artillery systems like the U.S. provided HIMARS and howitzers and mortars, commonly used by Kyiv's fighters. The system increases the efficiency of artillery fire and survivability on the battlefield, the Kremlin said. It is designed to track an opponent's missiles back to its launcher, finding the precise location of the artillery system before passing on this information to its artillery. It is the most modern Russian radar system, with a phased array antenna for reconnaissance of artillery firing positions. Russian state news agency RIA Novosti reported Tuesday. It works alongside other counter-battery systems Russia has deployed to the battlefield in Ukraine, such as the prized Zoopark set of systems. But within just a few hours, Kyiv's special forces said Ukraine had hit a Yastreb AV system at an unspecified location in the south of the country with one of its dozens of HIMARS, the very artillery system high up on the Yastreb AV's list to detect. The system was destroyed, Ukraine said, posting a brief clip showing a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone tracking the Yastreb AV in the Ukrainian countryside before the impact. It is unclear how many Yastreb AV systems are in use in Ukraine, but Kyiv's military said it had destroyed one Yastreb AV in August. Moscow and Kyiv are grappling with using their counter-battery radar systems more effectively than the other, searching for and taking out the artillery systems threatening their troops. With the grueling, attritional war closing in fast on the 2-year mark, hunting down Russia's counter-battery radar systems will only be more important for Ukraine. Experts previously suggested to Newsweek that against a larger military such as Russia's, Ukraine's targeting of radar systems could have a disproportionate impact on Russian operations. Ukrainian media reports suggest that each of the new Yastreb AV systems could cost up to $250 million, significantly more expensive than systems like the Zoopark.
There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, thanks to the courageous actions of the fighters of the Aerial Reconnaissance Unit of the 3rd Operational Brigade Spartan. They managed to prevent the breakthrough of a Russian armored personnel carrier and its crew into the defensive positions of the Ukrainian military near the village of Robotyno. The situation reportedly became particularly tense after an armored personnel carrier hit a mine and its crew was forced to flee to seek shelter in a destroyed house. Despite their attempts to hide, Spartans' fighters were vigilant and used the civilian drone as an effective means to detect and eliminate the threat. It is obvious that Ukrainian fighters had placed mines in advance on the side of the road behind enemy lines, knowing that the enemy regularly used this route. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, the soldiers of the 3rd Separate Special Forces Regiment destroyed the Borisoglavsk 2 electronic warfare station, which they were proud of and shouted to the whole world that there were no analogues, and it was impossible to destroy it. This episode highlights the importance of electronic warfare in modern military conflicts. Russia actively uses electronic warfare systems to counter the enemy, but their effectiveness is not always absolute. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Ukrainian military personnel showed the moment how a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, together with infantry, was going to break through the Ukrainian defense line in the vicinity of Novomikhailivka, but something clearly did not go according to plan. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit recorded the moment on video when a Ukrainian AFPV kamikaze drone attacked a Russian buggy, which was first in motion along with personnel, and then stopped to unload provisions and ammunition in the vicinity of Avdiivka. It is reported that when the Russian buggy stopped to unload, creating the illusion of safety, the Ukrainian operators quickly and accurately resolved the situation. Perhaps they were using an ambush scheme or simply waiting patiently for the right moment to attack. In any case, their actions were well timed and efficiently executed.
Today we will discuss the latest losses from the Russian side. Dozens of Russian artillery and tanks have become easy targets for Ukrainian missiles and drones. These continuous losses do not rule out the possibility that Russian troops will lose the war against Ukrainian troops. Russia lost more than 50 artillery systems and armored personnel vehicles in Ukraine in the past day, along with 17 tanks, according to Ukraine's military, as Kyiv stares down a new Russian summer offensive without concrete promises of fresh U.S. military aid. Russian forces have lost a total of 7,074 tanks in more than 25 months of full-scale war, according to new figures published by Ukraine's military on Sunday. According to Kyiv's tally, Moscow has also lost 13,551 armored personnel vehicles and 11,316 artillery systems since February 2022. Equipment losses in conflict conditions are notoriously opaque, and Western experts suggest Kyiv's and Moscow's reported losses are higher than the actual figures. Russia's defense ministry said on Saturday that Ukraine had lost a total of 15,699 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, as well as 8,692 field artillery guns and mortars. Although to be treated with caution, the figures indicate the scale of losses on both sides, heading towards the spring and summer months, expected to usher in new offensives. Kyiv has warned that Moscow is likely to start a new offensive in late May or during the summer, and that it is amassing new troops for the effort. As surveillance, drones can be forward observers, spotting troop movements and warning frontline units of a potential combined arms assault. FPVs, often low-priced, can be quickly crowdfunded while holding enough explosives to kill and maim enemy armor, or even platoons, as seen in Ukraine, where undisciplined Russian troops have been picked off on top of their infantry fighting vehicles. Artillery systems have featured high up on Kyiv's wish list of supplies from its Western backers, and the ammunition to keep the systems operational and practical has become a priority. Ukrainian officials and Western analysts have said a lack of shells has restrained Ukraine's operations as Russian forces inch westward. Kyiv's fighters are thought to be firing around a fifth of the ammunition Russia's troops use against Ukrainian forces. A new tranche of military, economic, and humanitarian aid for Ukraine, worth around $60 billion, has been bogged down in Congress for months by infighting, causing deep concerns in Kyiv. If there is no U.S. support, it means that we have no air defense, no Patriot missiles, no jammers for electronic warfare, no 155mm artillery rounds. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Washington Post in an interview published in late March. It means we will go back, retreat, step by step, in small steps, he said. Should the front lines not hold out because of shortages, he added, the Russians could go to the big cities. I still believe that we will be able to achieve a positive vote from the U.S. Congress, Zelensky said on Saturday in comments reported by Ukraine's presidential office. We understand when the Russians could start counteroffensive actions. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military launched a swarm of drones at the Morozovsk air base, which it claimed destroyed 6 Russian warplanes, significantly damaged 8 other jets, and killed or injured 20 members of the Russian military base. Russia said its air defenses downed 53 Ukrainian drones, the majority of which targeted the southern Rostov region, and only a power substation was damaged. The Morozovsk airfield was used by Russian bombers that have been launching guided aerial bombs at Ukraine's cities and frontline positions, according to the officials, who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the operation publicly. Ukraine's security service assaulted cooperation with the army, Ukrainian intelligence officials told the AP, adding that about 20 members of the airfield's personnel were killed or injured during the attack. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says changes must be made to improve mobilization as the Ukrainian military and the country's civilian leadership work to improve conditions for troops on and off the battlefield. Zelensky said mobilization was discussed during meetings on December 1st with military commanders to discuss scenarios to produce concrete results next year. Everything necessary for our state, our brigades. These specific results must be calculated precisely. This includes issues of mobilization, Zelensky said in his evening video message. Everyone in Ukraine understands that changes are needed in this area. On the battlefield, the General Staff of the Ukrainian military said in its summary on December 1st that Russian troops tried 10 times unsuccessfully to restore its lost position near Robotyne in the Zaporizhia region. The summary said 67 combat clashes occurred during the day, and the enemy conducted assault operations in 5 areas. This included hard-fought areas near Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Mariinka.
In this video, Ukrainian strike drones destroy what attacked the Ukrainians during the day. First, they burned a tank. And then a group of 3 units, a tank and 2 APCs. A perfect bonfire. Another tank. Some of the ammunition detonated, but it wasn't enough to tear the tank apart. This is what it all looks like the next day. This is the same place we saw in the previous video, where the drone was finishing off the Russian tanks. Yep, sometimes all that remains of a tank is a metal husk like this. Or as these 2 APCs changed color due to the high temperature of the fire. Everything inside incinerated. And here are the tanks from the beginning of the video. A similar situation befell this Russian tank. 1 drone was enough to set it on fire. And here are some more beautiful shots of burning Russian junk. And this T-80 was instantly reduced to molecules after encountering a drone. What idiot allowed this foolishness? Let me explain what happened here. The APC brought TM-62 anti-tank mines and unloaded them nearby. The fatal mistake was the delay. They should have retreated immediately. From the explosion, the APC did a sideways somersault. Here's another moment. Ukrainians were sure that Russian infantry was hiding here, and made a precise strike on this building. And here, the Russians knew what was waiting for them, so they tried to hide. But they underestimated the skill of the FPV operator, who aimed the drone right at them. Take another look at how spectacular that was. After the occupants broke through the first line of defense, the AFU fielded an experienced 47 Mechanized Brigade, which was equipped with Western weapons and was able to stop the enemy. The situation in Avdiivka was not bad for Ukraine. They controlled the flanks, height, and presence of troops in the territory of Coke, and the chemical plant made life 10 times more difficult for the enemy. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. One more episode. One of the Russian armored personnel carriers is already engulfed in flames. The second one pulls off the road and stops? For what? The third vehicle starts moving, and at that moment, the Ukrainians hit the target exactly. Excellent work by the artillery. Novodonetsk, the Donetsk region. A Russian column moves towards Ukrainian positions. One of the tanks explodes. What do you think destroyed it? You'd be surprised. A Ukrainian tank drove alone against the column and hit the Russian enemy with an apt shot. The Ukrainians don't stop and continue to deliver blow after blow. At some point, the tank casts a thermal curtain and starts backing up. Apparently, the Russians tried to aim an ATGM at it. The Russians lose another tank. Hopefully, we'll see more of this story later. Another unsuccessful assault by the Russian army. Even after the BMP is hit, the tank continues to move forward. This is his last mistake. The assault has failed. The armored personnel carrier and the tank are destroyed. And this is already a jeweled hit from Ukrainian artillery. This Russian tank paid dearly for stopping. A precise hit from 155mm ammunition turns the tank into a piece of metal. Let's start with 2 episodes of failed assaults. 3 Russian tanks decided to attack the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. The first and the second tank are hit by the Ukrainians using ATGMs, and this Russian tank can't escape death. The second tank, not wanting to meet the same fate as its comrades, starts to reverse. The chances of escaping the battlefield seem slim, but they try anyway. The second Russian tank also explodes on the mines. The attack is a failure. Looks like another armored group. The first tank, equipped with a mine plow, leads the way, and for good reason. It hits the mines and stops. In these frames, Ukrainians finish off a previously halted Russian tank. A powerful explosion. No chance. Take, for example, this Russian tank. Its attempt to hide from the battlefield failed. Here's another good example. The tank was leaving, but the drone struck it and detonated the ammunition. For our channel sponsors, an uncensored video with unique footage has just been released. You can find the link in the description of this video and in the hint. This kamikaze drone circles around an MTLB abandoned by the Russians. The operator chooses the most favorable angle for the attack. He manages to land the drone right in the open hatch and destroys the Russian junk. In this place, a Russian tank hit mines and was immobilized, and then it awaited a quite obvious fate. Another Russian tank, and the same exact fate. Another one? Maybe it's time for us to create a ranking of the most beautiful destruction of Russian tanks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones. The legendary Bukhanka and its adventures in Ukraine. Another one. It's so symbolic that it's standing near an Orthodox cross. And that's all. Powerful. These Russians thought that the night would help them hide from Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians modify kamikaze drones, installing night vision cameras in them. Take a look at how clearly the Russian APC is visible at night. the second hit. Excellent work. This Russian tank, after enduring 4 bombs to the engine compartment, is headed for the scrapyard. This Russian tank drives over mines and becomes an easy target for the Javelin anti-tank missile. A precise hit. The missile penetrates inside and ignites the propellants. The tank, utterly destroyed. This tank joined the Russian army in 2022, but today, Ukrainians put an end to its tour on their lands. But these are not the only targets that Ukrainians have hit. 2 kamikaze drones destroyed this Strela 10 air defense system. And this is how HIMARS rockets struck the Grad MLRS. The second target was camouflaged, but that didn't hinder its detection and destruction. For the third target, Ukrainians waited for the right moment and then delivered a devastating blow with a kamikaze drone. The operator of this drone is a real ace. The hatch of the Russian tank was open less than half. Take another look at this throw. The tank catches fire. Take a look at this video. Is this not sheer madness? Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and soldiers are seemingly on a suicide mission against the Ukrainian defense. At first, I thought it was a Javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Let's return to the destruction of equipment. I've got more to show. The drone dives into its target. The APC is instantly engulfed in flames. In 30 minutes, the Russian APC was completely burned out. That's simply the amount of time it took the Ukrainians to replace the battery and return. This is a Russian tank. And this is the same tank through the eyes of a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone inspected the Russian tracked crematorium. Or take a look at this video. 5 kamikaze drones attack a Russian tank. The 5th hit becomes fatal for the Russian armor. A crater is formed in the tank's location. Can you imagine the power of that explosion? I think that after such a strike, this tank is not combat ready. As in this case. And here's another T-90, which couldn't cross a puddle and got stuck in the mud. And this is all on one section of the front. Can you imagine how many resources Russia is burning in this war? The enemy is very strong. Yes, these are tracked crematoriums, and the Russian soldiers taking part in this? Lunatics. Here's the perfect example. The incendiary mixture falls on the netting protecting the tank from grenades and bombs. The contents gradually drip onto the tank, and the flames spread to the hull. Let's move now to another section of the front where constant fighting is taking place. These two APCs were stopped by mines. After one of them explodes, another explosion occurs. Pay attention to this exact moment here. An armor plate falls on a mine, hits it, and another explosion happens. This APC was carrying ammunition to Russian soldiers at their positions. Another pair of APCs. The drone first approaches from the left side, but the hit doesn't yield the desired result. Then, the Ukrainians send a second drone. This hit becomes fatal. Both APCs are destroyed. The Ukrainians thwarted the Russians' attempt to evacuate their damaged tank. The strike drone returns with explosives to prevent such attempts in the future. The mission was completed successfully. Another Russian tank. The drone again hits the target precisely. This piece of Russian junk is also destroyed. The Russians are moving the 2S-19 Masta-S self-propelled howitzer into the forest to hide it from Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. The Ukrainians, however, see all of this. When the howitzer is securely hidden, the Ukrainians launch a HIMARS missile at it. The target is eliminated. These are the frames of the work of a Russian UAV team. A Ukrainian drone tracked a Russian reconnaissance drone and followed it to the command post. Then, the HIMARS took over. The OSA anti-aircraft missile system is moving towards the forest to hide from the Ukrainians. As you might have guessed, the Russians didn't succeed. The Russian army's attack, meant to bring strategic success, did not go as planned. Russian tanks were blowing up, burning, and exploding again. Let's take a closer look. Tanks, APCs, and airborne troops, all ready for battle, split into small groups. The Ukrainians are using cluster bombs. An ATGM hits a Russian APC. A tank deploys troops in an open field. Now, this APC is nothing more than a meat grinder. The second group is just hundreds of meters from Ukrainian positions. They were met with a surprise left overnight. Pay attention to this synchronization. And these are the daredevils who went on solo attacks. Pure madness. The third group consists of APCs and the madmen inside of them. A precise ATGM hit stops the Russian armored vehicle. A tank and 3 APCs. The Ukrainians are simply picking off tanks with javelins. Russian tanks are engulfed in flames. The attack goes on. APCs rush to take cover. It almost made it. But then, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the APC. Now, check out this video. This column was just decimated. Ukrainians strike with cluster bombs to destroy the enemy's manpower. It's rather effective. This APC made an unforgivable mistake. From just 10 to 20 meters away, Ukrainians destroy it with an RPG shot. Such bravery deserves a like. And here's an ATGM Stugna P missile nearly hitting a Russian APC. The Russians try to dig in at one of the settlements in the Avdiivka region. A dozen soldiers disembark on the village's outskirts. An unpleasant surprise awaits them on the other side of the village. As the soldiers leave the APC, it drives away. Notice this moment. A kamikaze drone flies over the APC. The drone continues to tail the Russian armored vehicle. The operator waits for the right moment to deliver a crushing blow. The APC is immobilized. Another Ukrainian drone strikes. The APC is destroyed. One hit was enough to start a fire. The drone returns and discovers the debris that used to be this tub. Another hero, a tank nicknamed Kuzbas. The Russians tried to protect it from all sides. And maybe it could have withstood one or two more hits from a kamikaze drone, but it couldn't save it from a grenade. The fire did its job. Kuzbas burned to ashes. Another group of soldiers rushes to assist. Are the Russians running out of tanks? This attack used only APCs. The first target is hit. While these Russians were thinking about what to do next, another drone came in. And here's the strike on the third APC. 3 drones at once. Another APC. Beautiful. And the final target. This one got the farthest, but it didn't save it from destruction. Excellent work. Facing such fierce resistance, the Russians decide to hide their APC in a garage. 3 kamikaze drones attack the target. The APC was burned. If you look closely, you can see its turret. The northern region. APCs fall into a trap. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone first blows up one. The second target. This APC thought it would find protection in a strip of forest. The APC is burned. And this is a strike on Russian logistical support, a truck carrying supplies. The Ukrainians sent a second drone. After meeting the truck, it flared up. Fire destroyed the entire vehicle. The Russians stopped to fix their truck. Ukrainians took advantage of the pause and delivered a devastating strike. Ukrainian drones come to spook the enemy. The first target is TM62 anti-tank mines. What a powerful explosion! And here's the fourth Grad. The fifth target. Another strike by HIMARS. The Grad is destroyed. And that's not all. Another MLRS. And take a look at the fire after being hit. Another excellent fireworks display. This series concludes with this strike. Some very effective work. How about this visit by a kamikaze drone to an enemy bunker? I don't know what was stored there, but it burned and detonated for a long time. A beautiful spectacle. The Russian radar Yastreb with an astonishing cost of $250 million. Ukrainians didn't hesitate to use HIMARS missiles to destroy such a rare and important target. But let's return to armored personnel carriers and Russian tanks. More footage of the magical transformation of a Russian tank into a pile of scrap metal. The Avdiivka region. A Russian T-90M tank assaults Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. And here's a cargo truck and an armored car, Tiger. They both become easy prey for kamikaze drones. A Russian cargo truck brought ammunition to the positions, and and the Ukrainians immediately destroyed it. What a pity. Now it's the turn of this Soviet junk, a T-62 tank from 1967. This is the kind of scrap the Russians are pulling to the front. Now it's the APC's turn. One grenade and $400,000 turns into scrap metal. A drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. Here are 2 Russian tanks from one of the failed attacks I showed at the beginning. The Ukrainians target a T-90 tank. This video shows the perfect performance of a 155mm SMART projectile. Pay attention to the accuracy. You can clearly see the trajectory of the projectile in these shots. For example, this is the defeat of a Russian tank by a Javelin missile. There was no detonation. Apparently, it was without ammunition. Abandoned Russian equipment must be destroyed. Kamikaze drones are excellent at this task. Look how this drone neatly flies inside the AFV. Nice work. Naturally, it was not without epic explosions. This is how beautifully the Russian AFV turned into scrap metal. Also, this Russian tank. Nice bang. Another tank of militants. A Ukrainian soldier videotapes the detonation of the tank. Near Sivur. The Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? As I promised, I'm releasing part 2. Let's take a look at the madness that the Russians are engaging in. Klishchivka. At this point, the Russians have become more active and are trying to regain control of the settlement. A Russian armored strike group is moving across the fields towards the settlement. A Ukrainian drone is performing reconnaissance and adjusting artillery. Kaboom! The Russian guys are starting to have some serious problems on their hands. Ukrainian artillery begins to work the stalled column. 2 Russian armored personnel carriers are engulfed in flames. An immobilized tank stands nearby. The assault has failed. Near Soledar, Russian paratroopers went on a daring assault. A BMD moves towards the AFU positions and fires from a machine gun. A Stugna P ATGM missile hits the vehicle. The second missile kills the armored personnel carrier. The second armored personnel carrier with a paratrooper suffered no less. The Russians have resorted to a new tactic. They sent an armored group to assault during the night. The Ukrainians were scouting and did not miss the moment. A Russian tank explodes on mines. The fourth tank was damaged as a result of blowing up the previous tanks. As a result, the Russians lost 4 vehicles. The northern flank of Avdiivka. The Russian column leaves on a combat mission. The 1st Armored Personnel Carrier goes to scout the road and runs into a mine barrier. The artillery hits the Russian vehicles very accurately. At some point, the Russians realize that it is madness to keep moving forward and begin to turn around. The 2nd column advances to the assault. The Russian tank succeeds in destroying the Ukrainian mines. The 2nd tank decides to repeat this insane challenge and turns into a pile of scrap metal. And what's this? Did HIMARS end up in the neighborhood? That doesn't stop the Russians. The 3rd column continues to move on. Panic among the Russians. 2/3 of the armored vehicles destroyed. This leads to reckless action and more casualties. The Ukrainians sure are giving these Russians hell. 2 armored personnel carriers and 2 tanks move towards the Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians open fire and hit the armored personnel carrier. Probably they used an ATGM or a kamikaze drone. The tanks move off the road, changing the direction of their attack. The 2nd armored personnel carrier is also immobilized. The tanks continue their attempt to flank the vehicle. They receive orders and begin to retreat, while firing on Ukrainian positions. The assault fails. The Kharkiv region. A suicidal attack of Russian tanks. The 1st tank, with a minesweeper, falls victim to an ATGM. It is stopped in its tracks, as well as the column that was moving behind it. The Ukrainians hit an armored personnel carrier with the 2nd shot. A kamikaze drone flies towards the stopped column. It crashes into the tank, penetrates the armor, and leads to the explosion of the ammunition. The column is destroyed. And how about this beauty? A kamikaze drone strikes an abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier. The damage causes a fire, and then an explosion. Beautiful footage of burning Russian junk. Here's another piece of Russian junk. The drone flies right inside. The fire does its job. When the drone returned, it found this. And who do we have here? This drone perfectly flies into the armored personnel carrier, and then it's the same old story. And here's another Russian tank. The operator perfectly executes the task and destroys the tank. There's another target nearby, also a tank. Watch how beautifully it explodes after the drone's hit. Another example. 2 Russian tanks were stopped by Ukrainian warriors. Ukrainians used kamikaze drones to finish them off completely. This Russian APC decided to pave its own way. Relying on luck, the APC rushes towards the trench, but explodes on mines. This venture cost the Russians another APC. In the tree line, a Russian tank stops. A fatal mistake. After the first hit, it accelerates and charges towards the Ukrainians. The 2nd hit immobilizes it. It immediately catches fire. Take a look at these flames. The Russian tank is destroyed. The negligence of this APC became fatal. Venturing into direct fire from the Ukrainian tank, there was no escape for it. One shot, and the target is hit. Impact and explosion. This is how it looks from the tank's perspective. Such precise work deserves a thumbs up. The Russian column of tanks and APCs was spotted by the Ukrainians. They split into groups and attack from several directions at once. The first to come under fire is an APC. Next, the Ukrainians destroy a tank. This APC runs over mines. It turned into a crematorium on tracks. And this is a hit from a Javelin missile. The affected tank moves about 10 meters and stops. The Russians try to flee, but run into mines. Out of the entire column, only this armored personnel carrier manages to survive. It crosses the road and gets stuck. Today, we're going to dive into this madness and try to answer the question, what's wrong with the Russian army? It all starts with the insane attacks of Russian armored groups. The crew of this tank doesn't realize it's walked into a trap. Not only are Ukrainian soldiers to the left of the tank, but there are also surprises laid out on the road ahead. By the way, a Ukrainian soldier missed the tank with an anti-tank guided missile, but the mines saved the day. Nearby, the drone detects a UAV. A precise hit on the target. Fire and detonation. Shark UAV plus HIMARS MLRS is a deadly combination. Let's take a look at a practical example. First, the drone tracks down future victims. When it arrives at the parking lot, the coordinates are transmitted to the HIMARS, which in turn fires a missile at each target. As a result, the Pion, Grad, and Masta S are destroyed. The author of the video signed these strikes as HIMARS strikes on the electronic warfare R-934 Borysoglebsk 2 complex near Donetsk. I'm not sure that these are HIMARS, it kind of looks more like ordinary artillery, but it doesn't change the results. The complex completely destroyed. The Russians, having come under Ukrainian fire, requested evacuation, and an armored personnel carrier moved in. The Ukrainians saw this and launched several kamikaze drones. Now the Russians have no means of transportation and are stuck in a dangerous position. A Russian BMP-2. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. Sharks tracked down an enemy location. 8 trucks, possibly for transporting personnel and ammunition. A second hit causes ammunition to ignite in one of the trucks. Vehicles nearby must have been damaged in the strikes as well. For dozens of soldiers, this day was their last. Excellent work by the reconnaissance and artillery. I don't know what the crew of this tank was doing, but they didn't do it for long. Suddenly, a Ukrainian drone knocked into the engine compartment and interrupted them. Another tank destroyed. This Buhanka was transporting weapons for Russian soldiers, but was stopped in time by a Ukrainian drone. This is a Russian Ural truck, and it has an automatic grenade launcher mounted on top. A kamikaze drone manages to hit a target that is already retreating. The second drone secures this result. Another armored personnel carrier arrives to evacuate the Russian soldiers. A third drone flies in to prevent it. Fortunately for the Russians, the drone does not reach them in time due to heavy interference. From this video, it becomes clear just how destructive FPV drones can be. After the second hit, a part of the building simply crumbled. And this happened even though the drone exploded inside, not upon impact with a wall. Now, the Bradley has lived up to its nickname, Tank Killer. In these next frames, a modern Russian T-90M tank turns into a sieve. The American combat monster once again confirmed its effectiveness. The M242 Bushmaster cannon is capable of penetrating up to 40 millimeters of steel armor. The fatal mistake of this Russian tank is its position relative to the Bradley. Incendiary and armor-piercing rounds damaged the tank's systems. The crew panicked, released smoke screens, and tried to retreat. But the machine already had its critical damage. This is what a Russian tank looks like after an encounter with Brad. Bradley came to stop the Russian infantry, which is crossing the field to storm Ukrainian positions. Even if the Russians reach another planting, it changes nothing. The cannon cuts down trees like thin branches. They offer no cover. This is an incident near Avdiivka. Ukrainian assault troops called for reinforcements. The Bradley IFV easily suppresses the Russian advance. And even if the Russians manage to occupy a building, there's no sense in hiding in it. Brad's cannon will riddle the building's walls. Another thwarted attack of Russian tanks. The kamikaze drone pursues the target and hits the tank in the most vulnerable part of the turret. This part of the Russian tank stores some of the ammunition. That's why they often explode after being hit by drones. The turret was thrown several meters from the tank. Excellent work. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone enters the Russian tank with precision. After a few seconds of agonizing wait, an explosion occurs. It seems the Ukrainians have started using self-destructing systems for drones in such cases. Smoke, fire, and a spectacular explosion. This video is yet another good example. The Russians should have long considered the storage of ammunition in the tank turret. Look at the force with which the turret is thrown up. At that moment, incredible pressure is created inside the tank. After the failed assault, the Russians abandoned their tank. Ukrainians use FPV drones to destroy it. One of the hits proves fatal for the Russian tank. Kamikaze drones can reach Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry in the most inaccessible places or several kilometers from the front line. In this video, the Russians are preparing fortification structures, and engineering equipment is at work. The drone dives into an excavator, and an explosion occurs. The fuel ignites brilliantly. The job is done perfectly. Or this operation to destroy a BM-21 Grad in the rear. Special forces identify the target, launched a drone, and directed it to the Russian rocket artillery. The Russians tried to change their location, but they couldn't escape pursuit. The existence of this BM-21 Grad is terminated. Russian assaults near the village of Vodian, not far from Avdiivka. The video shows the result of one of the meat attacks. Take a look and try to count the number of broken and destroyed Russian pieces of equipment. They are pelting Ukrainian positions with meat and metal. I can't call it any other way. The Russians have installed the electronic warfare Pol-21 on these structures. The Ukrainians are using HIMARS to destroy this target. Why use such a powerful weapon? It's simple. These electronic warfare weapons are capable of interfering with drones and radio communications. This footage shows electronic warfare R-934 near Svitlodarsk, Donetsk region. The equipment was destroyed with the help of American HIMARS MLRS. Near Sivur, the Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The third and fourth vehicles realize that only death awaits them. And now, pay attention to this. A Ukrainian tank rides in front of the Russian APC. and makes the first blow on the damaged armored personnel carrier. It loads the gun, and with the second shot, immobilizes the fleeing vehicle. Damn, these guys fight like the real elite. In parallel, the Ukrainians continue to destroy the Russian army using familiar weapons. Let's take a look at some of the work of HIMARS, artillery, and drones. A shark hits a Russian fuel tanker and several other Russian vehicles. The first artillery strike spooked the Russians, and one of the vehicles left the position. A little later, a passenger car arrived at the position to evacuate the unlucky ones. And this is the work of the National Guard of Ukraine. In this footage, you are watching the work of the Russian army's mortar crew. The reconnaissance drone is correcting the artillery strikes, and the Ukrainians' first shot hits the target and destroys it. Nice work. Drone hovers over the AFV and makes the first drop. A grenade falls nearby. The operator corrects the drone. The second grenade hits the target. This, however, is not enough. The armored vehicle must be destroyed. The fourth grenade hits exactly in the engine compartment. Now, it can be considered that the task is accomplished. In the morning, the drone returns to evaluate its nightly work. You can see the results on your screens. Russian-style demining. It turned out to be quite effective. A Russian tank hits the first, second, third mine, and imagine that it's still able to continue moving. Although the explosions look quite impressive. The tank passes through a wooded area, enters a field, and begins to clear anti-personnel mines. Once again, it hits an anti-tank mine. This was enough for the tank to catch fire, and the crew decided to abandon it. A good example for other Russian tankers to destroy armored vehicles. Two APCs packed with paratroopers race across the open terrain. They are detected and try to break through with a fight. Kamikaze drones are directed at them. This is what the operator of a Ukrainian FPV drone sees. Drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Another T-90. It's easy to recognize by its unique turret. It is also destroyed. On the battlefield, many damaged but not destroyed tanks remain. While the Russians have retreated, it's necessary to destroy what they left behind in their fight. Thus, the Ukrainians will now be burning tank after tank, APC after APC, leaving nothing for the Russians. Yet ahead is still half a video with a large amount of destroyed Russian armor. I wonder what these Russians were discussing. The Ukrainians release a birdie with explosives. It hits the armored personnel carrier. The explosion easily tears it apart and scatters pieces of armor. A powerful blast. But that's not all. The Ukrainians have spotted another target. Another BMP. A kamikaze drone qualitatively fulfills the task. To make sure of it, a second drone arrives, also armed with explosives. There's no need for it, and so it flies away. A Russian tank was abandoned after a failed assault. The operator is trying to get the drone into the open hatch. It succeeds on the second attempt. Now we can watch a beautiful fire show. In these frames, Ukrainian kamikaze drones are killing what is left of the Russian column after meeting with the Ukrainians. Who wants a deep-fried buhanka? A drone blast rips the car apart from the inside out. The Akatsia SPA covers the Russians attacking near Avdiivka. A Ukrainian drone successfully eliminates this target. The SBU has discovered a warehouse with anti-tank mines. At any moment, the Russians may use them to strengthen their defenses. So, we must not delay. The warehouse is destroyed. Another truck with a mortar. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone goes after its target. Nice hit. A Russian T-80 tank. After another meaty assault, the Russians abandoned it. Now, the Ukrainians will take care of it. It burns well. During a daytime reconnaissance mission, a vehicle was detected moving towards the forward positions. Having followed the movement of the car, the Ukrainians discovered the deployment of Russian soldiers. The decision was made to destroy the vehicle and make the occupants nervous. As it later turned out, the vehicle was carrying ammunition. After the failed attack, the Russians drop their cans and flee.